just advised me, Subodh, you have gone crazy. And not more than 10 people will come there.
You have a different idea of living happily ever after. Can I ask you a difficult question? Hello, hello, this is Evil O coming to you once again from Udaipur. And today I have a special guest all the way from Goa, and his name is Subodh Kerkar. How are you, Subodh?
Oh, great. Well, in
Great.
COVID.
How's the weather down in sunny Goa?
Well, it's raining cats and dogs these days.
Is it?
We have a few days of no rain, but in general, it has been raining very heavily.
Right before this interview started, I got caught in I was having lunch with Ganpat across the lake, and we were just finishing. I was ready to come home and do this, and this tremendous downpour came, lasted about 45 minutes. So we were just trapped because we were on the motorcycle, the Enfield. So there was no way to get back. And so I literally just kind of walked in the door, and I'm still a little wet, as you can tell up here. But anyway, so I want to start this by just, if I remember right, you have an interesting history because you were trained as a doctor, and you were a well-known, were you a general practitioner?
Yes. And I used to run a hospital.
You used to run a hospital?
Yeah. The first one in a place called Kalangut, which is the Queen of Beaches in Goa. Yeah.
Okay. So you actually founded the hospital?
I founded the hospital. It was a small hospital. It was just about a 12, 15 bedded hospital. And it was a need of the hour because there was no hospital in the town and we needed one. So I started one.
And how long ago was that?
I started it in 1984, and ran it for about 7, 8 years until 1990.
Okay.
1982, yeah.
So what caused you, I mean, that's a profitable profession, I would think.
Yes.
And so what would cause you to leave a very profitable profession and decide to give it all up and become an artist, which is notoriously difficult to survive as an artist, and most artists struggle and live in poverty.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I was a very successful doctor, and this question has been often posed to me. Most people ask me, people like to climb the ladder of success. Why did you come down? But I can tell you one thing that now looking back, I've been practicing as an artist for the last 30 years. And I can tell you that I'm a very happy man. You can tell from the perpetual smile which I carry on my face. Yeah. So I believe that the only purpose of life is to be happy. And if you do something which you love to do, there is a possibility that you will be happy. And if you do something which you don't like to do, you'll be definitely unhappy. So I did not sort of dislike medicine, but after 7 years of practice, I found that it was very routine. And most of my patients then were tourists. And they were British tourists suffering from only one problem: loose motion, loose motions. So the idea of devoting my life to treating British loose motions was not very palatable. And I thought India has taken enough shit from the British for 150 years.
Really?
Anymore.
Really? You know, whenever I see tourists with that problem, I say, God, just go to the pharmacist, get some Imodium and some Ziplocs. You don't even have to see a doctor. But nobody listens to you. They always go see a doctor because
Well,
I don't know why.
Anyway, I won't talk medicine now. So I'm very happy practicing what I'm doing, art. And every day is a new day.
Right, exactly. So when I think of some of the early series of yours, or at least to me, they're early ones that I remember seeing, you did a series of photographs on the beach with the fishermen.
Yes.
Is that one of your first series or no?
I started as a landscape painter. And that's because my father used to be an artist, and he was also a school teacher. He was a school teacher. And he painted in his spare time. And he was a student of Haldankar, who was quite a well-known realistic painter of his time in 1930s and 40s. And so he studied under Haldan. And he started doing landscapes of Goa. And as a little boy, I learned how to do a classical British watercolor landscape. And I used to do them quite good. And that was my first training as an artist. And I did.
I think I remember seeing
Yeah.
those paintings. They were on display during Suna Paranta one time, weren't they?
They have been. We have had quite a few exhibitions. I will share some with you because those were, I would still say, quite very professional watercolors. And
I'm quite sure I saw them at exhibitions sometime.
Yeah, perhaps you might have. Yeah, I will share some with you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, share
And
some
then I
with me.
started doing portraits. I started doing fishermen, fisherwomen. I started painting boats, and then slowly, I had an opportunity to go to Europe, to Germany. And that was the first time that I went to contemporary art museums.
Okay.
And to be very frank with you, initially when I started looking at, contemporary art spaces, I didn't understand most of this stuff because my father was a conservative realistic artist. And he has
Right.
brought me up telling me that all this modern thing is nonsense.
Right.
That's what I had learned from my father. So I decided I will find out myself. And I started checking it out, reading, trying to sort of make inroads into the understanding of contemporary stuff. And then, the whole Pandora's box was open to me. And my first series of work, which I would say, which I respect, my watercolors and all is fine. I also got bored of doing watercolors after some time, the landscapes and the portraits.
Yeah.
And so the kind of new work, first series was doing some work with sand and light, creating installations with sand. And then the second series was working with actually the boats, buying old boats and converting them into sculptures.
Oh, I remember those boat sculptures. Yes, where you actually sawed the boats in half sometimes and did like a clamshell with the boats.
That's right. So that is.
And what were those to represent? I'm just curious.
The boats.
Yeah, the boat
So,
series.
see, what happened was when I was into my landscape period, I would make watercolors of the boats. Then slowly my interest shifted from the boats per se, just to the textures and the surface of the boat, which were carved out by the waves. And those surfaces sort of started attracting me a lot. And I started even doing some paintings just of the surfaces of boats. And then suddenly the fiberglass came in, and all the fishermen started building new boats in fiberglass.
Right.
And the old wooden boats had no use because they required a lot of maintenance. And so I started buying the old boats from the fishermen. And when you study an old boat in Goa, they are sort of the pieces of wood are tied together, they're stitched together with coir rope. And there are lots of marks of the nets being pulled into the boat laden with fish. So the boat has a story. The boat has been used for maybe about 50, 60, 70 years, and it has all the stories of the fishermen. So when I cut the boats and use this material for creating a sculpture, the memory of the boat becomes the material for sculpture. So I use history as a medium for sculpture.
Yeah, some of them almost seem to me like little chapels, they had that kind of.
The chapels
sense.
of memory. The
chapels of memory.
Yes.
And maybe I make that association because Goa has such a strong Christian influence, but your work has always been very tied to the sea.
Yeah.
For the most part. And I remember, like you mentioned, the early sand sculptures. I think you did some in Dubai also, didn't you? Right. On the beach near the sea. Do you want to talk about that experience at all?
In Dubai, actually, I did 2 series of works. One was I took boat sculptures from Goa in a container and placed them on the beach next to the Burj Arab. And the shape of Burj Arab is very much like my sculpture. So it was a large, a small sculpture in the foreground and the same shape in the background. So it was very interesting because it was kind of stirring navigational history between Arabia and India. Because the oldest port in the world, one of the oldest port, is in Lothal in Gujarat. And belongs to the Indus Valley civilization. And the Arab ships used to come to this port.
Right, there was trade between the two.
The trade between Arabia and India is very old. And so through my sculptures, it was sort of revisiting the history of trade, the navigation between Arabia and India.
So, okay, so you started with sand sculptures, then boats, then where did you go? Were the mussels the next?
Yeah. Then I went with the mussels, so I started planting mussels. Now, when I started planting mussels, I remember the day about 15 years ago when I did it first. It was a rainy day. It was monsoon time like this. And I don't know why, but I just had a bag full of mussel shells with me. Maybe I had bought them to eat, and then the shells were collected. And I went with a little bag full of mussel shells on the beach. It was a kind of a rainy day. The ocean was very wild, and the sky was dark. It was very windy. It was kind of a mega drama of nature. And then I planted my little mussel shells in one straight line. And there was a miracle. The performance of those mussel shells stole the show. The mega drama of the nature became just a backdrop for the performance of my mussel shells.
Well, I love that series because the mussel shells have two sides. There's the darkish green side, and then there's very white interior. So as you walk around, you can just, they become like iridescents and they shift as you look at them. It's a very nice series.
Yeah. So that's exactly it. So what I do is when I create an installation with mussel shells, my inspiration is the ocean. My theme is also the ocean because I am creating the impression of the ocean using mussel shells. And my medium is given to me by the ocean. And my canvas is also the ocean because I do it on the seashore. So,
yeah, you really like natural materials and materials that you just find.
Yes.
You know, which is one thing I like. But I do want to talk about the photographs for a while because those do depart from that found natural material because you're obviously making digital prints, or I assume they're digital. So you did a whole series with the fishermen. Do you want to talk about that? Because I like that series a lot.
So that series was essentially because, all the fishermen were my patients when I was practicing as a doctor. And I developed very...
So you didn't just have shitting Brits.
No. I started the hospital for the fishermen and then the Brits came.
Okay.
So the fishermen were my patients, and then I could sort of study their life from a very close angle, because unlike in a city practice, a village practice of a doctor is completely different. The doctor becomes almost like a priest. He becomes a member of the family. Then you visit the families. And so you know not just their physical illnesses, but also many more things. And so I realized that the life of a fisherman is inseparable from the ocean. There's such a bondage. There's such a bondage there. Even the metaphors they use, they almost talk to the ocean. They feel the ocean. And sometimes I always felt that the ocean is basically salty because of the sweat of the fishermen. And so this idea of the inseparability of the fisherman and the ocean is what I present to this.
Do they actually say that the ocean is salty because of the sweat of the fishermen?
No, that is my line.
Oh, but it's a nice line. I've never heard that. That's quite a good way to look at it. I could see that as being a sailor's or a fisherman's saying.
So that's because I spend a lot of time with them, and I sometimes see when they pull the net, they're sweating, and then they just will clean their sweat, and then it falls in the water, and that's why the line came. And another wonderful line I have is, the fishermen are kind of farmers of the ocean. And when I see the boat cutting through the water, it reminds me of the plow which cuts through the fields.
Exactly.
And the boat cutting to the water is
plow and bow. Yes, exactly. So were the fishermen happy to cooperate in making those photographs? Did they understand what you were doing?
Initially, I did some small versions of the work with fishermen because it is not possible to have them free for the whole day or for many hours. So I started working with fishermen initially, and then when sort of the idea sort of germinated. Then I couldn't really work with the fishermen. Then I hired laborers. So I would hire 100 laborers with 2 buses, and I had to stitch short pants in one color for everybody in black. And then we would go to the beach, and I would work the whole day, right from 7 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock in the evening. And all the laborers, most of them were Bengalis. And
okay.
And they love fish. And they all know to swim because they also come from.
So the people in the photographs are not necessarily Goan fishermen.
No, they're not.
They're
Some photographs
Bengalis.
they are in the early works, but later on they are Bengali. Also, they're part-time fishermen. The Bengali laborers, all of them go fishing, and so I work with them. And for them, it's something wonderful because they have never been paid the daily wages for just coming to the beach, standing in a line, and then in between going for a swim.
Well, I have that with my models up in the village of Varda here because, we often invite just working class people, to come and, have their photo taken. And it's like, they get paid. I paid everybody like a model. And then I say, oh, you also get some beaties, you can get some beer, whatever. We make it into a party and they really think, well, that's really a nice way to make some money.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But
So
anyway.
that was the fisherman series, but then something very interesting happened with this fisherman series. So I used to climb on the top of a very tall ladder and take pictures. So I had to do a kind of a director's job of arranging them in compositions. I had to shout, keep them amused because there were no rehearsals. We had to just do it. And they were not sort of, so I would just, the best works have come out of spontaneous ideas. I, of course, always made some drawings before I went to the beach, but then the best works were just what we thought then and there at the moment. And the interesting thing is I have a little problem with heights. So I'm comfortable. But then, especially when I was clicking pictures of this compositions, so it's standing on a tall ladder with no support actually, I never felt scared. That's the beauty of it.
Well, I had to shoot photos. The closest I can relate, I had to shoot photos of Mitu Sen down in Chennai one time at some artist camp. And I just was standing on a chair, but I was afraid standing on the chair. But, once you get into it, you just forget. You just forget. You're just busy doing what you're doing, But so, yeah, I really like the Fisherman series. So then, the other thing I noticed with your work, you have a lot of very textural elements in your work. And you start doing that whole series of like dishes that are kind of encrusted, if I'm remembering right, china that's kind of encrusted,
I think before
tiles from old houses. Do you want to talk about that kind of work for a while?
I will do that, but I'll just like to talk a little bit more about the Fisherman series.
Okay, go ahead.
What happened was there was this some big international political conference in Goa. And so the airport manager called me, the Goa airport manager, and he said, can you decorate the airport with your some works? No money, free.
Okay.
So I said, well, I will, okay, provided you allow me to put the Museum of Goa symbol there, the signage there. So he allowed me. So I had a lot of these photographs printed, and we had, as soon as you got off the aircraft, you had to walk in a long passage, and I had about 30 of these photographs pasted there on the wall. And
I remember seeing those.
Yeah.
I think the last time I went down to the Suna Paranta, or not to the, no, what's it called? Serendipity. Mm-hmm. Last time I went down to Serendipity, I remember seeing those on the wall. It was quite a nice display.
So, but that helped me in a big way. Of course, a lot of people came to know about the museum. The photographs were appreciated by many. But more than that, there was a gentleman called Bharat Bala. Now, Bharat Bala is a very important filmmaker. He has done these things like Matuze Salam, Vande Mataram, a very, very good photographer, a good filmmaker. He just looked at those photographs and he told his friend, whoever has done this, I'm going to make a film about him. And
so did he?
He did. So he found my address. He found my address through some friends. It's not so difficult in Goa to find my address. So, and he came to meet me. And then he came with his crew, the full crew with drones and everything. And then he paid for 3 days of shooting, hiring of the laborers. And we did the video of.
Is that available to be seen anywhere?
Yeah,
is it on YouTube?
He has a channel called Virtual Bharat, where he uploads videos every week. And mine will be one of the videos which will be put full.
I'll put the link in the description of this when I
not
upload it.
It's not yet out. The trailer is out.
Oh, okay. The trailer is out. Okay, I can put the link to the trailer.
Then Bharat Bala's, that shoot found a completely new idea for me. because I had always shot stills of my work. I had never shot video. And then I started video, and now I'm doing hundreds of works with video with fishing.
Oh, really? I didn't
And
know that. I
I'm
didn't
going
know
to
that.
share a few with you. I'm going to share it.
Share a couple now. I'll insert some short video.
And they're just 1 minute or 30 seconds. Yeah.
Sure, that's perfect.
So I will send you some. So I found a completely new way because of the interventions with Bharat Bala.
Okay, can I pry you away from the fishermen now?
Yeah. Now
So
we can.
I want to get to the encrusted plates and the tiles and things from the old houses, because I find those series interesting too. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yes, yes. So all this while, I was sort of working with the ocean, and my connection with the ocean is well known. I consider myself an ocean artist. Then the idea came, why not work with the ocean, in collaboration with the ocean? So the idea came because I found an anchor was just in the mud in the riverside. And I just thought I will just collect that anchor. It was full of oyster shells. And the anchor was brought home. It was washed in a car wash. And then this anchor became a fantastic work of art. There is a very nice theory. When the anchor was lying there, it was not the work of art because there was no intention of creating art. Art requires an intention. But when I picked it up and washed it, there was an intention, and it became a wonderful work of art, and that's still my favorite. And that anchor gave me sort of an idea of working with oyster shells. So I signed a MOU with the ocean, memorandum of understanding, and I started keeping plates. I started making sculptures. I started imagining that there's some kind of an empire at the bottom of the ocean, and the emperor is going in a procession. Now, emperors require some kind of royal symbols. Emperors require
A punka and a flag.
Yeah, the royal staff.
Yes.
So I started imagining the royal staffs of the emperors of the ocean. And I created these sculptures and made a cage and lowered them at the bottom of the river, where the river meets the ocean, where there were already some rocks with oyster shells, and kept them there for 3 years.
Oh, 3 years, really?
Yes, 3 years.
That's a long time. Okay.
It's a long time. So, and then when I brought them out, of course, in between I used to go and check them out. And I said, okay, keep them for maybe a little bit longer, a little bit longer. And when I brought them out, I think for me, it was, it was almost like a feeling that, okay, your wife has delivered.
Yeah, it's magical.
It is magical.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much to charge for these works now, because I don't know how much the ocean charges per hour.
Yeah, the ocean wants its commission. For sure.
Yeah. So I commissioned the ocean. So this is a lot of, and I'm continuing to do the work. Now,
I want to move on to talk about your museum a little bit too. But before we do that, is there any other body of work you'd like to talk about?
Well, there are lots of series, but I think talking about a museum will be a good idea because that has been...
Let's talk about the museum. I'm very impressed by the museum. Yeah. You created yourself the way I understand it. Yeah. I don't think you had any outside money. Am I correct? It came out of your own pocket. It's an incredible structure. I think it's 3 stories tall.
3-storied, and the architect is Dean de Cruz.
Dean de Cruz. Yeah. Beautiful space. So how did this come about, and how is it being utilized? As a gift shop, as a cafe space, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
So let's talk about the Museum of Goa.
The museum was sort of, I have always been an activist. So I was a student activist, and I've even been to jail for student activism. So
what did you go to jail for?
Basically, it was a student activism, which was we wanted to get rid of certain policies of the government, the Goa government, where the chief minister those days had a sort of a discretion to admit 2 students to medical school.
Okay.
And I thought this is not, why should the chief minister have a discretion to just have 2 students in the medical school? So we wanted it out, scrapped. And so we agitated, and we succeeded. Yeah.
Okay, well, good for you.
Yeah. So anyway, so this kind of a social service and doing something for the society and awareness of social issues has always been with me. And as an artist, when I gave up my medicine and I started practicing art as an artist, and well, I didn't, so I started making my living, a fairly good living out of my art. And then I suddenly realized that in a country of 1.3 billion, not more than 1 lakh people connect with contemporary art. This could be an exaggeration. And I can sort of tell you how I sort of arrived at this figure. Some 2-3 years ago, I was invited to inaugurate a conference of architects and designers. And it was a national conference with 7,000 delegates.
Wow.
It was a huge conference happening at 2-3 venues with video screens everywhere. And I was a speaker there. And so in my speech, and this were, mind you, there were architects and designers. They were not, some students, they were architects and designers.
And they were actually practicing people in their career.
Architects and designers. So I just told them that I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to tell you 10 names. And please, those who have heard of these names, raise your hand. And these names were basically well-known Indian artists, the contemporary artists. We start with Krishnamachari Bose, Riaz Komu, Vivan Sundaram, Vasu X Vasu.
Well, I was going to say, if you said Vasu X Vasu, they would all know that.
Vasudev Gaitonde, Francis Newton Souza, Vishwanathan, Shilpa Gupta, Anita Dubey. So all the well-known names, and Hussain Saab also. Now, out of this huge crowd of architects and designers, about 20 people raised their hands. 20 people. And then I put the next question. Those who have raised your hands and those who have heard of these artists, how many of you know their work very well? So if I show a work of Gaitonde or Souza, how many can sort of identify? Just two, three hands came up.
Right.
Now, this is the state of affairs. And
that's a sad state of affairs. That's scary to hear.
I don't blame them. I don't blame them for the simple reason is they were never given an opportunity to have a look at the works of these artists.
Well, you would think especially architects and designers would keep their finger on the pulse of the art scene a little bit, you know, because when they design and when they create their buildings, I mean, they have to have some idea about the art that might be placed inside of it, I would think.
Yes.
But maybe not.
I would also think that, but then I realized that in the architecture colleges, hardly any art is taught. Initially, the artists were the architects. Michelangelo did a very good job with the Sistine Chapel. And the artists were also the architects. And then slowly, even JJ School of Art, the architecture and art, I think a course which was together in one premise. Slowly, there was a kind of a divorce. And now the divorce is complete. So complete that there is hardly any art taught to architectural students.
That's really sad to hear.
Yeah. So unless you have a sense of sculpture, it is very difficult to design a good building. So there are many good architects designing a good building. This is in spite of the education system. They have learned it on their own.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I realized that it is very, very necessary that contemporary art goes to the masses. There is a kind of a cultural barrier, and I wanted to sort of break that barrier. So I started the museum. And I must tell you that within 4 years, we had 300 people coming in every day. And out of this 300 people who visited the museum, paying a fee of 150 rupees, 95% of them had never ever been to any contemporary museum in their life.
Really?
Yeah.
So there were a lot of local Goans who came.
So they came from all over the country.
All over the country.
So this became a Museum of Goa is a kind of a destination, a tourist destination in Goa now. Of course, with the corona now, it's all closed. I mean, we are open, but it will take some time till people start coming again. And I'm very hopeful that that will happen. And so the idea of starting a museum was, first of all, taking art to the to everybody. And I also realized that art has many functions. It's not just entertainment. Art also sort of makes people think plural. Art basically tells you that there are many points of view. And the situation in this country today is there is only one point of view, which is thirst upon you. And when people start appreciating art, they become more plural, they become more open to new ideas. And so it is very important for a healthy society to sort of engage with art.
Right.
And that's why I started a museum. Yeah.
Well, you've done a really incredible job with it. How do you handle the programming with the museum? Like,
Yeah.
what kind of exhibitions do you hold? I know that you show your own work in the museum,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
So
quite
what I
often,
do
but
is,
you also have shows every year that are curated, I think.
yeah.
Yeah.
So initially, when I started the museum, I was sort of a very ardent student of history, especially Goa's history, and history became a footnote to my work. And so the Museum of Goa is a museum of contemporary art, and it's also a museum of history, where Goa's histories, not one history, but histories, are narrated using a contemporary idiom. Now, when your work was shown, for example, it is part of history in the sense it's part of the social structure, what you
It
showed.
was part of Lena Vincent Sunish's show, and Sabita Sachi
Yeah,
were the
yeah,
two co-curators that I remember.
yeah, yeah.
That
So,
was a good show.
yeah, it is a very good show. And now what
Has
we
a
do
nice
is,
catalog too.
yeah, you paid for the catalog.
Oh, don't tell people that.
No, but anyway, I mean, it's not easy to run a museum. When I, for example, started the museum, I had 4 crores because
Yeah.
I got that money because I sold a house which I built, I mean, many years ago in the middle of Kalangut, a busy
Okay.
street. And I got this money and I was 55 years old. And all my friends told me, take this money and live happily ever after.
Yeah.
Because when I said I'm starting a museum and that too in an industrial estate, all my friends advised me, Subodh, you have gone crazy. And not more than 10 people will come there. And
Well, you have a different idea of living happily ever after. I mean, that's the same with me,
yeah,
because I could have retired quite a long time ago, actually, but it's like, I don't want to retire. I want to do what I'm doing.
yeah, exactly. So but I must tell you that when I tell my friends now that, well, you said live happily ever after with this money. I am not living happily ever after now. After 5 years of this museum, I am living happier ever after. Because the idea that 300 people enjoy every day your museum and they shower you with compliments, I think, what more do you want? So anyway, so
So
that was right.
can I ask you a difficult question
Oh, sure.
that might be put you on the spot a little bit, but you know, I think it gives you a chance to answer, because a lot of times, you know, what you hear the scuttlebutt in the art scene, and it affects me too, because I hear the same thing. It's like, oh, Subodh Kerkar, he's just a rich man who bought himself into the art scene. You know, that is sad. So I hear that again and again, especially among younger kids. And I think it's said the same about me many times. That's filtered back to me. I'm just some rich man who came here. And I mean, I don't have that. I'm sure you have much more money than I do, you know? And so I don't know how to explain it, because for me, it's my passion.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I am privileged in the sense that I did have some money, but I struggled too, because when I was in the US, I mean, my first jobs were literally cleaning floors, you know? So, I mean, I know what it's like to do a hard, sweaty job. But it's like, you know, you reach the point where it's sort of like, well, now you're free. You don't want to retire, and you do want to be involved and do something. So I'm talking for you. Your opinions on this.
Okay. So, well, I will tell you, as I explained earlier, I am a teacher's son. So I came from the poorest of poor background. My father's retiring salary was 1,000 rupees a month. So I came from a poor background. I practiced as a doctor, which sort of put the family in so 7-8 years as a doctor. We were financially all right. Not very rich. Within 7 years, you can't become a very rich man, but I was sort of comfortable financially. And then I went back to art. I started, and I have earned my living only from art. I have not done any smuggling, any drug dealing, nothing of that sort. I have only done art all my life.
Those Fisher boats,
Yeah.
smuggling.
So
No.
and then, well, I was always doing things. I'm sort of, you know, I never went for sponsorship to anybody, because being a doctor, I also had this safety wall that if this doesn't work, I will go back to my medicine perhaps. So I had this great safety wall, and I didn't have to use it. So I made a comfortable living, but then I made a very happy living. And yeah, and then 4 crores, which I talked about, the only money I had, but I had already built a house. And so I had a house and I had this 4 crores. And then I have a wife who is a professor at the university. So, well, I won't go starving if things didn't work. But then I didn't have to sort of use any of that. And for me, I think people will talk. That is all fine. So I have one thing I don't do is I don't hate anybody. I will never speak bad about anybody. That's what I've learned from Gandhi. Gandhi is another passion of mine. And
I love Gandhi too. I think it's amazing that you've done what you have done and that you took the risk to quit a high paying profession like being a doctor with a hospital to do what you have done, to devote yourself to social issues through art. And I mean, you haven't gifted in the financial sense, but you have given Goa this incredible museum,
yes.
You know? So
And
it's like, I think what you've done is incredible, but I mean, I'm just another evil capitalist, so.
And I have not yet exhausted. It's not yet over. I have done this museum, and perhaps I would like to start an art institution in the future, because I find that art education is, needs a lot of improvement in this country. And
but there's another difficult question for you. This is the last difficult question.
Okay.
But, another scuttlebutt is, Subodh Kerkar, he just shows his own art in that museum.
Okay.
And now, do you think the museum is a vanity project?
No.
Or do you certainly envision it as being much more than that? I'll let you speak.
Yeah. Okay. So the Museum of Goa, we do not have any funding. It started purely as, I was creating a lot of work of my own based on Goa's history. So I said, let me start a museum of history with my work. That was the initial objective. I started it, and then I have a lot of friends who are artists in Goa. So I appealed to them. I sort of organized lectures on history to all these artists. And then they sort of created a lot of work, and these works came in. So initially it was supposed to be only my work, then all the Goan artists, then the other artists. So right now we have a lot of work by different artists from Goa and other parts of the country. And we have an open call. Open call meaning I don't have money to buy the works, but for example, any work which is sort of connected with Goa, artists, it's not a representation of Goa's history, it's work in response to Goa. So if we have anything like this, we will always find a place, provided it is sort of accepted by my curatorial team. So I have a few people advising me on that. So that will be accepted. So we can't pay because we can't acquire work, because we're not that kind of a museum. In future, we might be able to. But at the moment, our situation is such that, we will welcome any good work of art. And so I'm very, very open. And at the same time, we do the Goa Affordable Art Festival.
And you still have proper curators coming in and curating shows, right?
Absolutely. The curator who was part of the show where you were involved, now she's doing another beautiful project. Her name is Sabitha TP.
Sabitha Sachi.
Sabitha Sachi. She's curating a lovely show now, which is called Posthumous Dialogues with Francis Newton Sousa. And
this sounds good.
Yeah, these works will be sort of by maybe about 30 or 40 Indian artists who create work in response to Sousa.
So they'll be responding to Sousa. Yeah. And there'll be some actual Sousas in the show too?
No, because with that, I don't even want to take a risk, because we don't have
There's such a big insurance cost with that.
Insurance and all that, we don't have that kind of money and that kind of security. And so we can't risk that. But
here I'm smoking a beedi in front of the doctor. You'll probably have my head for that.
Oh, well, I don't give medical advice anymore.
I never smoked in my life until like 5 years ago, and I started beedies out in the village, and now I always have like 2 of them a day or so a day. It's like, it's bad for me, I know, but they're very addictive. So that's all very interesting. Is there anything else you want to say? I don't like these to get too long.
Well, what I would say is, we are open now, the Museum of Goa, and a lot of people visiting Goa, because now slowly the lockdown is being lifted up. So I would sort of welcome those who want to visit Goa with open arms. And again, I would appeal through your evil O to artists who would like to perhaps, have some work, want to create some work in response to Goa. There will be always a place for good work on that subject in museum.
So you're saying people should not be afraid to approach you?
No, not at all. We are absolutely open.
I know, you've always seemed like a very welcoming person. You're very open to people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So thank you, Subodh Kerkar. I'm
Yeah.
going to sign off. This is Evil O from Udaipur saying goodbye. Subodh, say goodbye.
Goodbye.
You
Okay.
have to
See you.
wave. That's our thing.
Yeah.
Bye.
See you.